Since the release of the first list of the richest people in the world in 1982, Forbes magazine includes their drug lords and gangsters. Organized crime is part of the global economy, these income calculations. For example, the Calabrian Mafia, the Ndrangheta in 2013 was enriched with more than $53 billion, which is much more than what income gets some of the largest corporations. In the list of the richest men in the world are present in the majority of the drug lords. It is understandable that the bandits always made a lot of money on human weaknesses, much more than brought a racket. Therefore, those leaders of the criminal world in South America, where he established a drug trafficking from cultivation to raw material processing, to date have surpassed all in their great riches. Pablo Escobar. Colombian drug lord Pablo Escobar became the first criminal caught in the list of 100 international billionaires by Forbes in 1987, with revenues of $3 billion. He dropped out only after his death in 1995. Escobar-led Medellin cartel from 1981 to 1986 had revenue of $7 billion, the drug lord took away 40%. The main wealth of the cartel got from smuggling cocaine into the United States, about 15 tons daily. In the late 1980s, he owned 80% of the cocaine market in the world. Weak Escobar was earning $420 million. According to other sources, his fortune totaled more than $30 billion. Every year the king of cocaine lost about $2.1 billion, 10% of revenue. Since the money is randomly stored in warehouses and abandoned farms, they were destroyed by mold and rodents. Each month he spent $2,500 on rubber bands that hold bills. Escobar once burned us $2 million to warm daughter, the family then hid in the mountains, and the kindle fire was not anything else. In 1984, the cartel offered to pay the national debt of Colombia in exchange for immunity. For Escobar, the head of the Office for Combating Drugs has appointed an award in $11 million in 1991. The drug lord made a deal with the Colombian government for the construction of a private prison, with a football field and his chosen guards, to which the government could not get closer than 5 kilometers. El Chapo. In 2009, Mexican drug lord Joaquin Guzman Lauer, nicknamed Shorty, was in the list of the richest people in the world Forbes with a fortune of $1 billion in 2012 and 2013. Years he served 63 and 67 place among the most influential people in the world. Other sources in all estimated his wealth at $12 billion. The Sinaloa cartel under Lauer was responsible for 25% of the illegal traffic of drugs from Mexico to the United States and has revenue of $3 billion. Cartel Napro Davili cocaine more than Escobar at the peak of his career. Little Man started his business in the early 1990s, transporting cocaine, including cans of chili. In 1993 Mexican authorities confiscated this 7-ton load. He was declared the most wanted man of Mexico, a bounty of $7 million, $5 million from the United States and another $2 million from Mexico. For the first time he was arrested in 1993, but he escaped from prison in 2001. In recent times the Special Services Mexico seized Lauer in Sinaloa in January 2016. Drug lord killed vanity. He was going to make a biopic about himself and was casting. In addition, the actor Sean Penn flew to the Runt at a meeting for an interview. It is believed that the authorities were able to track the movements of the criminal in particular because of this. The Ochoa brothers, Gonzalo Rodriguez Gacha. In 1987, together with Escobar in the list of the richest on Forbes were co-founders of the Medellin cartel, Jorge Luis Ochoa Vázquez, with an income of $2 billion, with his brothers Juan David and Fabio, receiving 30% of revenue of the cartel. The Ochoa brothers remained in the Forbes list another 6 years until not yet surrendered to authorities. Who lived at the same time? Drug lord Gonzalo Rodriguez Gacha, who worked as Medellínsky cartel, or independently, for example, transporting to the United States from Bogotá, cocaine, disguised as a flower delivery, was also a billionaire. In 1988, Forbes estimated his fortune at $1.3 billion. Gacha lasted in the list for 2 years, until he was shot dead by Colombian police. Rafael Caro Quintero and Amado Carrillo Fuentes. Before in Mexico rose star drug lord Shorty, there rattled 2 names: Rafael Caro Quintero, pictured, and the Carrillo Fuentes. The head of the Guadalajara cartel, Rafael Quintero, belonged to the marijuana plantation, called Buffalo Ranch. During a police raid in 1984 on the ranch was seized about 6,000 ton marijuana that, according to the cost Quintero from $3.20 to $8 billion. The Guadalajara cartel was earning $5 billion a year. In the Mexican press there were rumors that the team behind Escobar offered to pay the external debt of Mexico in exchange for his freedom. Drug dealer in 1989 was sentenced to 40 years in a Mexican prison, but 28 years later, he was released. Second Mexican drug Carrillo Fuentes, head of the Juarez cartel. His fortune was estimated at $25 billion. It is believed that he used his wealth for many years to evade justice. Fuentes was nicknamed Lord of Heaven for its extensive fleet of 22 aircraft for transportation of cocaine in the United States. Fuentes died in 1997 during plastic surgery to change appearance. Morris Dalitz. Moritz, M.O. Dalitz was one such legendary gangsters like Al Capone and Bugsy Siegel. In the era of Prohibition, he was involved in bootlegging, and later gambling, business and real estate. In 1982, Dalitz was in the first Forbes list of the richest together with artist Yoko Ono, actor Bob Hope and the accountant of the Mafia, Meyer Lansky. State Militsa estimated at $110 million, but how much he actually earned, remains a question. A significant proportion of wealth Morris Dalitz received from the first casino of Las Vegas. In 1949 he became a co-founder of several casinos. In the 1950s, took part in the appearance of the Paradise Development Company, has built Las Vegas the University and Convention Center. In the 1960s, invested in $100 million at La Costa Resort near San Diego, after which he sued for $640 million by Penthouse magazine, who wrote that the building was on the mob. Unlike many colleagues on the criminal past, Dalitz lived to old age in recent years involved in charity work. Khun S.A. The condition of the Khun S.A. Opium King was estimated at $5 billion. Na Chong Shifu, the son of Chinese women from the ethnic Shan, in the 1960s, changed his name to the pseudonym Khun S.A., meaning Prince Prosperous. During these years he headed the Burmese army engaged in the cultivation of opium in the Golden Triangle of Southeast Asia. There were 20,000 men. In the 1970s and 80s CA Army controlled the Thai-Burmese border and was responsible for 45% of pure heroin in the United States. The Office of the Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA, called him the best in the business. The head of the Opium King of the United States government has appointed an award in $2 million to the 90th years of the last century. DEA was able to break the trade chain of Khun S.A. He moved to Yangon and retired. Currently opium production in the Golden Triangle has fallen to 5% of global numbers, in 1975 was 70%. About how did the drug lord billions before his death in 2007, there are different versions from lived in luxury to was satisfied with a modest pension. Griselda Blanco. The Colombian Griselda Blanco, the Western press called the godmother of cocaine. Griselda Blanco was one of the key figures in the cocaine trade in Miami in the 1970s and 1980s. Even in the mail drug she had a reputation as a ruthless businessman. Her condition was close to $2 billion, however, revenues exuberant she was far away. 3 times a widow whose spouse died, according to rumors, from her hands, one of the sons she named Michael Corleone. Its distribution network is making tens of millions of dollars and was carrying about 1,500 kilograms of cocaine per month. Before his arrest in 1985 in California, Godmother appeared in the list of the most dangerous drug dealer, along with Escobar and the Ochoas. She was charged from 40 to 200 killings in Florida, the death penalty, but the woman managed to escape due to a technical error in court to testify against her. The officer was discredited, as had the sex talk on the phone with his secretary in the office of the prosecutor. Blanco was imprisoned in federal prison in 2004 and deported to Colombia, where 8 years later was shot by an assassin on a motorcycle. Al Capone. Capone, the most famous American gangster. A character named Al Capone appeared in 77 films about the Mafia. At the time of death in 1947, his fortune was estimated at $1.5 billion. Capone acted in different criminal spheres: bootleggers, racketeering, murder. In 1929, the US government declared him enemy no. 1. The prosecutor's office repeatedly sentenced Capone to prison, but a few months later he was released. In the end, 1931, Capone was able to condemn only for evasion. Taxes for 11 years. A large part of the time he had to spend in Alcatraz. In 1939 Capone was released, but his health was deteriorating. He suffered from syphilis and dementia. In 2012, Forbes did an analysis of the former property of Capone. Chicago key Tiraspolnu house that he bought with his first earnings, was estimated at $450,000, and the mansion in Miami Beach, where he died in 1947, at $9.95 million. Dawood Ibrahim Kaskar. Income is the most wanted criminal of India is estimated at $6.7 billion. Forbes included Kaskara in the lists of the most influential people in the world in 2009, 2010 and 2011, 50, 63, and 57 respectively. His crime syndicate in company accused of terrorist attacks in Mumbai in 1993 and 2008. In addition, he was involved in the smuggling of drugs and weapons. The U.S. government believes that Dawood Ibrahim Kaskar is associated with Al-Qaeda and Taliban. According to one version, Kaskara hiding in Pakistan. Anthony Salerno. In 1986, Fortune magazine published a list of 50 most powerful mafia bosses. The chief editor explained that the material that organized crime is a powerful economic factor. Anthony Salerno, nicknamed Fat Tony, also appeared in the list. Led by a gangster clan, Genovese, 300 people worked in New York for racketeering and drugs. The influence of the clan was spread to Cleveland, Nevada, and Miami, and in the sphere of interest also included the construction, usury, and casino. Since the 1960s the clan was earning $50 million a year. Between 1981 and 1985, Salerno introduced a 2% tax of the Mafia in New York for all contractors for pouring concrete buildings worth more than $2 million. Real as Anthony Salerno could reach $1 billion in 1988, the gangster was sentenced to 70 years for racketeering and the concealment of the illicit proceeds of $10 million a year, in the declaration were only given $40,000 per year. 4 years later, at the age of 80 years, he died in prison. Michael Francesi. Fortune 50 most powerful mafia bosses. Michael Francesi occupied 18th place. Franchise nicknamed the Yuppie Don, the son of a bank robber who made a cartel, which is engaged in production of films in the category of illegal sale of gasoline, scams repairing and selling the fraudulent loans. In a week, Michael Francesi received from $1 to $2 million in revenue. In 1985, the U.S. government accused him of fraud, stripped of assets for $4.8 million and ordered to pay $10 million for the illegal sale of gasoline through company lived. After 8 years in prison and payment of $15 million, Franchise moved to California and decided to capitalize on his criminal past. He has written 2 books, the autobiography Blood Covenant and a book with business tips, I'll Make You an Offer You Can't Refuse, and sold the rights to CBS for a mini-series about his life. Now the former gangster is living in the house for $2.7 million, drives a Porsche, giving interviews and lecturing at universities. Shinobu Tsukasa. 74-year-old Shinobu Tsukasa manages the clan Yakuza called Yamaguchi-gumi. Yamaguchi-gumi is included in the list of the 5 most powerful mafia groups in the world with an annual profit of $6.6 billion. Yamaguchi Prefecture was founded in the port city Kobe more than 100 years ago. It 23,400 people. Most of the income comes from the sale of drugs and gambling and extortion. Shinobu Tsukasa is the 6th leader of the clan's history. In the 1970s, he was sentenced to 13 years for the murder of a samurai sword. In 2005, he went to prison for 6 years for possession of firearms. In 2015, the Yamaguchi-gumi was split. Large part of the group stayed with Tsukasa, and 3,000 members formed a new clan, headed by Kunio Inu. John Gotti. The New York boss of the clan Gambino, John Gotti, received from the press 2 nicknames. Teflon Don, for so long was immune to justice, as well as Don Buck, expensive custom-made suits, meticulous hair, black Mercedes 450 and lush parties. Growing up in the South Bronx, Gotti in the 1950s joined the clan Gambino, one of the most powerful syndicates, trading gambling, extortion, loan sharking, and drugs. The U.S. government suspected that on the way to the head of the Gambino, Gotti, in 1985 he eliminated his predecessor Paul Castellano. Agent. The FBI, who worked on the Gotti case, said that he was the first media don, never tried to hide that he's super boss. And his broad way of life and the gloss has always given food for articles in the tabloids. Gotti received annually from $10 to $12 million in revenue, and the clan Gambino earned in the 1980s, more than $500 million a year. Justice got to Gotti only to 1992, 10 years later, he died in prison.